Hey everyone, so this is Matt Pinkard, and in this video I want to talk to you about Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verses 1 through 6, and I want to discuss why it's important for Christians to meditate on death. Now you may hear that and say, wow, that's really depressing, that's really sobering. Aren't we kind of surrounded with death enough as it is, especially right now in the middle of the COVID-19 worldwide pandemic? And the answer is yes. I understand death is never easy to talk about, and death is always hard, and it may be especially weighty right now. Proverbs 17 says that a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries the bones, and sometimes meditating on all these realities can kind of weigh us down. It can be heavy, it can be burdensome, and we need encouragement, we need hope. And so I'm hoping to look at Ecclesiastes through a lens where we can see that meditating on death can lead us to gladness, can lead us to joy, can lead us to put everything into the proper priority and context in life. So let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 7. And as we do, I do recognize we live in a culture that, for many of us, we're kind of removed from death. And this pandemic may be hitting some people in ways that we don't really get hit normally. You know, if we think about even the food that the average American puts on their table, a lot of times that food is, if it's meat, it's often killed at a factory or a place far from where we live. We're not actively involved in the process of killing that animal and of butchering it and of getting the meat cooked, or maybe we cook the meat, but you know what I'm saying, like of getting it divided to where it is when we purchase it at the market. Even if we consider many of those who are in the later seasons of life in our culture live in retirement homes or may live in nursing homes, and so we're kind of in some ways removed from all of the pains and the difficulties of approaching death, approaching those later years in life. And so I want to talk about Ecclesiastes 7 and why it's good and wise and appropriate for Christians to meditate on death regularly, okay? Ecclesiastes 7 verses 1 through 6. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It is better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fools. This also is vanity. So, starting with verse 1. A good name is better than precious ointment. Now, ointment is very precious, a costly luxury in ancient Israel. Even when we look at the life of Jesus, there's stories involving ointment, and the disciples getting upset with him because a woman put costly ointment on his feet shortly before his death and crucifixion and eventually, resurrection and ascension, all those things, right? And so it was a costly thing. May not be, viewed as such a precious commodity maybe now compared to as it was back then, but it very much was so, a very, very precious thing. And so here the writer of Ecclesiastes is telling us that a good name is even better than that, even more precious than that. And then he goes on to say, the day of death is better than the day of birth. Now, I think it's good to probably think about this from him not looking at his own life, because he's not observing his own day of death. He's observing another person's, and I think there's evidence from that by what he goes on to say in verse 2. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting. So the contrast here, the house of mourning, we could think of it like a funeral, and the house of feasting, we could think of it like a wedding. Now, why is it better to go to the house of mourning than the house of feasting? I mean, I don't know about you, but I would rather be at a wedding, right? Weddings are fun. Weddings, you get to eat awesome food sometimes at the reception, or you may have dancing, and there may be celebration and all sorts of joking and laughter, all these wonderful things, right? I love weddings. I may not love wearing tuxes and stuff personally, but like weddings are awesome, right? So why is it better to go to the house of mourning, to the funeral, than to the house of feasting? Well, he says the reason is this is the end of all mankind. Now, if you're watching this video, you are going to die someday. Your death will come. Death spread to all men because all have sinned, okay? And so because of our sin, death is the wages that we are earning, the lot that we have in life, and something that we all will receive because of our sin, okay? Now, this is the end of all mankind. And so the living will lay it to heart, okay? All of us know death is coming. All of us think about it in different ways. But how should we process it if you're watching this video as a Christian? How should you think about death? Well, he goes on to say that sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. What an interesting phrase. By sadness of face the heart is made glad. How can a heart be made glad in the midst of sadness? Well, let's get to that. But first I want to point out here, he's not saying that there is no place for laughter in life. If you look back to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, he actually says that there is a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. So there's times for all these things in life. There are times where you cry on a person's shoulders. There are times where you may be with your family and you spontaneously have a dance party, right? There are times for these things in life. There are movies we may watch where we cry our eyes out, right? Toy Story 3 gets me every time, guys. It just makes me cry. Other movies may make you roll on the ground laughing so hard, right? Laughter's a good thing. So why is he saying here that sorrow is better than laughter? Well, he says by sadness of face, the heart is made glad. And so if we think about this from our context, we're on the other side of the cross. And so we know what happens to Jesus. We know that he lives a perfect life, that he dies, that he's raised from the dead, and that he's ascended to God the Father, and that he's coming back one day. We know these things are true. And we know that for Christians, and now, of course, they knew that there was hope in a life to come. We know more than they did because God's revealed more of his plan and of himself to us throughout history. But we have a hope to look forward to. That is why sadness of the face can make our hearts glad, because as we think about these eternal realities, if you're a Christian, you have hope, right? You have a hope that when your body goes in the ground, it's not going to stay there forever. That ain't no grave going to hold my body down. That when I hear that trumpet sound, Lord Jesus comes back, we're eventually going to have redemption bodies. All these things are going to come to fruition. We're going to be saved to sin no more. And so even though we may be sad, funerals are very difficult, especially the nature of the person whose funeral it is. They can be very difficult. But as a Christian, we can reflect on these realities, and even in the midst of that sadness, have gladness in our heart, because we realize that what we have to look forward to is far better than what we're leaving behind. This is a tension we wrestle with, the tension to be with Jesus. This is what Paul talked about in Philippians 1. He said, "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me, yet which I shall choose, I cannot tell. I am hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ." Okay? And we wrestle with that struggle, right? Longing for Jesus, knowing that what he has prepared for us is far better than anything that we will experience in this life. This is what Paul also says in 1 Corinthians 2, verse 9. He says that it is written, "What no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him." I remember there were times where I've run into people I went to high school with, and there are things I miss about high school. I miss playing in organized sports. I miss various things sometimes, maybe. But they'll talk about like those are the glory days, and everything ahead of us is just going to pale in comparison to how great those days were. And I just think that's so sad to live that way or think that way. However you think that about about those things in life. Proverbs 4, verse 18 says this: "The path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until full day." So if you're a Christian, the glory days are not behind you. The glory days are ahead of you. The days of glorifying God and enjoying Him forever are increasing ahead of us, where we will be glorified, where we will receive resurrection bodies, where we will be set free from sinful hearts and minds and desires, all these things. Those glory days are ahead of us. There's a song I love from a rapper who's a Christian. He used to go by the name Pro. Now he goes by Derek Niner. But there's a line in one of his mixtapes where he says, "I know He reigns, but I yearn for the glory days when He comes back to earth and washes sin away." The glory days are ahead of us, right? The path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, shining brighter and brighter and brighter. We grow in righteousness. It's going brighter and brighter. But our hope and the glory of what's to come, it's all shining brighter and brighter and brighter. So even if you're in your 80s or 90s, right, the glory days they're still to come. They're still to come. It's going to be amazing, all right? I'm getting too excited here. So, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It is better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the songs of fools. Now, I don't know about you, but I've heard the songs of fools. I regret, in my high school days, I laughed a lot. Me and my friends had a lot of fun. We did some things that I'm pretty ashamed of, honestly, when I look back on it now. At the time, we thought, oh, it's so funny. And we laughed a lot. But really, I think about some of that laughter, some of those songs we sang together, and we were just fools. We were fools because we did not fear God. We did not honor Him and serve Him and love Him and cherish Him. We did not hate sin and love righteousness. We took delight in all these other things. That's the song of the fools. That was me. I was the fool, proclaiming my own song. It's better to hear the rebuke of the wise, right? Man, how I long for that. Man, how few there are. How few there are who rebuke with wisdom, who rebuke in the fear of the Lord and the comfort of the Holy Spirit. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of fools. Okay, what an illustration, right? Thorns under a pot, a meaningless fire burning, a meaningless roar, okay, that doesn't really accomplish anything. That's like the laughter of fools, okay? It's a vanity, all right? Laughter's a good thing, right? It's a beautiful gift, but it's so much sweeter, I can tell you, as a Christian. The laughter I have now as a believer compared to the laughter I had before I knew Christ, it's so much deeper and more robust and jovial than it ever was before, okay? Maybe you think that that's the ultimate, getting drunk and singing songs with friends, that is the ultimate joy, the ultimate enjoyment in life. You couldn't be farther mistaken, okay? Knowing Jesus and walking with Him and the joy of knowing Him, the laughter that comes as you're a Christian, it's so much better. It's so much better. So my encouragement in all this is, of course, we have to be careful. If we meditate on death too much, it can lead us to depression and grief. We have to have, of course, we need to be careful. But as we see death around us, as we go to funerals, as we think about these things, let's think wisely about them. Let us lay them to heart, so that our lives are more and more prioritized to reflect how God would want us to renew the time that He gives to us, because the days are evil, as Ephesians says. So there's my encouragement from Ecclesiastes. Hope this has been a blessing to you. Thanks very much for watching, and I pray God's blessing on you. Take care. Bye-bye.